I am Hannah, a 34-year-old marketing executive from Boston, married 7 years to Jake. My relationship with his mother, Evelyn, had always been cordial, though sometimes strained. But I never imagined a simple salad would be the thing to shatter our family's carefully maintained harmony. That Thanksgiving taught me that when something feels wrong, your intuition is trying to protect you. Before I dive into what happened that shocking night, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if family drama resonates with you. My story begins long before that fateful Thanksgiving dinner. I grew up in a middle-class household in a small town just outside of Boston. My parents worked hard to make ends meet, and I was the first in my family to graduate college. That achievement meant everything to me. I met Jake during my senior year at a university fundraiser where I was working as a student volunteer. He was there with his family, all dressed impeccably, in what I would later learn were designer clothes worth more than my entire tuition. Jake stood out immediately, not just because of his striking blue eyes and warm smile, but because of how genuinely interested he seemed in my thoughts about education, reform, the topic of the fundraiser. After talking for hours that night, we exchanged numbers, and within weeks we were dating seriously. Jake was everything I could hope for. Kind, intelligent, ambitious, and surprisingly down to earth, despite his privileged upbringing. 6 months into our relationship, he invited me to meet his family. That first meeting with the Arlington family was intimidating. Their home wasn't just a house. It was an estate with manicured gardens and a 3-car garage filled with luxury vehicles. Jake's father, William, was a successful investment banker who came from old money. He was reserved but polite, sizing me up with calculating eyes that made me feel like a business prospect rather than a potential daughter-in-law. But it was Evelyn Arlington, Jake's mother, who truly made an impression. At 57, she looked 45, thanks to what I would later learn were regular cosmetic procedures. Her platinum blonde hair was always perfectly styled, her clothes always designer labels, and her manner always proper, at least on the surface. "So Hannah," she had said during that first dinner, "Jake tells me you work in marketing. How interesting." I had hoped he would find someone in our circle, perhaps a lawyer or doctor, but marketing is creative. The way she emphasized creative made it sound like a communicable disease. Jake had squeezed my hand under the table, silently apologizing for his mother's backhanded comment. Then there was Meredith, Jake's younger sister. If Evelyn was cold, Meredith was frost. From the moment I entered their lives, she made it clear I wasn't welcome. She was her mother's perfect reflection, beautiful, polished, and connected to all the right people. She had married Bradley, a surgeon from another wealthy family, and together they presented the picture-perfect image Evelyn approved of. Jake always did have unusual taste, Meredith had remarked during that first dinner, looking me up and down like I was wearing rags instead of the nicest dress I owned at the time. Despite the chilly reception, Jake and I fell deeper in love, and within a year he proposed. The wedding planning was my first real battlefield with Evelyn. She insisted on a lavish ceremony at the country club with hundreds of guests, most of whom I had never met. I wanted something smaller and more personal. "If you truly loved Jake, you would want him to have the wedding he deserves," Evelyn had told me privately. Jake supported my vision for our wedding, but I could see the strain it put on his relationship with his mother. So I compromised on some aspects. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, while holding firm on others. The resulting wedding was beautiful, but felt more like an Arlington family production than our special day. After we married, the dynamic shifted. Evelyn realized I wasn't going away, so her tactics changed. The criticism became more subtle, wrapped in concern or helpful advice. "Hannah, darling, that casserole you brought to dinner last month was interesting. I could share some proper recipes if you'd like. Jake was raised with certain standards, you know." Or, "That dress is almost flattering on you. With your figure, it must be so challenging to find clothes that work." Over the 7 years of our marriage, I tried everything to win her approval. I took cooking classes, redecorated our home based on her suggestions, and even changed my hairstyle when she hinted my natural curls looked unpolished. Nothing ever seemed good enough. Jake noticed, of course, but he was caught in an impossible position between his wife and the mother who had always controlled his life. When he did stand up to her, the guilt trips would follow. "I only want what's best for you," she would tell him, eyes welling with tears that never quite fell. "After all I've sacrificed for you." The one ally I found in the family was Jake's cousin Abigail. She had grown up seeing through Evelyn's manipulations and recognized what was happening to me. Evelyn did the same thing to my mum. Abigail told me once when we met for coffee. She'll never accept anyone she didn't personally select for Jake. But stay strong. Jake loves you, not the woman his mother wishes you were. Amastasan. Those words helped me survive countless family gatherings where I felt like an outsider. And there was one consistent bright spot, Jake's grandfather Harold, who had always shown me genuine kindness. His eyes still sharp at 85, he seemed to see right through his daughter-in-law's facade. "You're good for my grandson," he told me once. He was becoming too much like his mother before he met you. Throughout those years, I also discovered something about myself. I had an unusually sensitive sense of smell. It started during my first pregnancy, which unfortunately ended in miscarriage at 10 weeks. The heightened sensitivity never went away. I could detect spoiled food before anyone else identified ingredients in complex dishes, and even sense people's moods through subtle changes in their natural scent. Jake teased me gently about my superpower, but it had proven useful many times. And then came the Thanksgiving when everything changed. The Arlingtons' annual Thanksgiving dinner was a tradition as rigid as Evelyn herself. The event was always hosted at their mansion, with each family member assigned specific contributions. Jake and I were typically relegated to bringing wine and a simple appetizer, items that could be easily tucked away if Evelyn deemed them not up to her standards. That year, we arrived at exactly 2 o'clock, not a minute earlier or later, as Evelyn considered promptness a virtue, and arriving early as rude as arriving late. The mansion was decorated in what Evelyn called tasteful holiday splendor, which meant expensive autumn-themed decor that looked straight out of a luxury magazine. "Hannah, Jake, so glad you could make it." Evelyn greeted us at the door, ear-kissing my cheeks without actually making contact. She was wearing a cashmere sweater in a rich burgundy shade that likely cost more than my entire wardrobe. "Jake, darling, your father is in the study. He wants to discuss the Henderson account with you." Before Jake could protest, she had ushered him toward the study, effectively separating us within moments of our arrival. This was her typical strategy: divide and conquer. "Hannah, you can put your coat in the guest room upstairs. Meredith and Bradley are already here helping me in the kitchen," she added, with emphasis on helping, but a subtle dig at my lack of involvement. After hanging up my coat, I made my way to the kitchen, determined to offer my assistance, despite knowing it would likely be rejected or criticized. The kitchen was massive, with top-of-the-line appliances and enough counter space to prepare food for 50 people, not just the 15 expected today. Meredith was arranging cheese on a platter, looking effortlessly elegant in a designer dress and full makeup. Her hair was styled in loose waves that probably required 2 hours at a salon to achieve. "Hannah," she acknowledged with a tight smile. "Nice dress." "Is that new?" It wasn't. I had worn it to last year's Christmas dinner, which Meredith had also attended. But I simply smiled and thanked her, refusing to take the bait. "Evelyn, is there anything I can help with?" I asked, approaching my mother-in-law, who was inspecting a turkey that looked picture perfect. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my hands. "I suppose you could rinse those cranberries. Just be careful not to splash anything on your dress. Water spots are so unsightly." I took the colander of cranberries to the sink, listening as Evelyn and Meredith conversed in hushed tones, occasionally glancing my way and sharing knowing smiles. Despite my best efforts to ignore their behavior, I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach, the tension that always accompanied family gatherings with the Arlingtons. As I worked, I noticed Evelyn periodically disappearing into the walk-in pantry, emerging with various ingredients that she quickly incorporated into a large crystal salad bowl. Her movements were secretive, almost furtive, which struck me as odd given her usually performative cooking style. "What kind of salad are you making, Evelyn?" I asked casually. She startled slightly, as if caught doing something inappropriate. "Oh, just a special family recipe. Very sophisticated flavors. European-inspired." She moved the bowl farther from my view. Meredith looked over with curiosity. "Mum, you never mentioned a special salad. Is it something new?" "Not for you, dear," Evelyn replied quickly. "It's just something I thought would pair well with certain people's palates." The emphasis on certain people wasn't lost on me. I continued working on the cranberries, but kept one eye on Evelyn's mysterious salad preparation. When Abigail arrived 30 minutes later, I felt a wave of relief. She hugged me warmly and immediately sensed my discomfort. "Aunt Evelyn controlling everything as usual," she whispered as she helped me arrange crackers on a serving plate. "And then some," I replied quietly. "She's making some secret salad and being weird about it." Abigail frowned. That's not like her. She usually wants everyone to see her culinary prowess. As the kitchen work continued, Jake returned from his father's study looking slightly frustrated. Business discussions with his father often left him that way. He slipped his arm around my waist and kissed my temple. "Everything okay in here?" he asked. "Perfect," Evelyn answered before I could speak. "Jake, would you help your father bring up the special wine from the cellar? Hannah, the cranberries need to be put into that copper pot, not the ceramic one." And so it went, with Evelyn directing everyone like pieces on a chessboard. I noticed that whenever I came near her special salad, she would shift positions or find a reason for me to move elsewhere. By the time the other relatives began arriving, my suspicion had grown into genuine concern. Just before dinner was to be served, Meredith brought out her contribution, a simple green salad with balsamic vinaigrette. She placed it on the kitchen island next to Evelyn's crystal bowl. That's when I caught my first clear glimpse of Evelyn's creation. A colourful mix of exotic-looking greens, nuts, and what appeared to be some kind of seafood. And that's when I smelled it. A distinct odour beneath the vinaigrette and herbs. Something was off. With my sensitive nose, I detected an undertone that reminded me of medication, or chemicals, definitely not something that belonged in food. Evelyn caught me looking and quickly covered her salad bowl with plastic wrap. "It needs to marinate a bit more," she explained, though salads typically don't require marination. As everyone began moving toward the dining room, I overheard Evelyn telling Meredith, "Make sure Hannah sits across from me. I want to see her enjoy my special recipe." That's when alarm bells really started ringing in my head. The Arlington dining room was a showcase of wealth and tradition. The mahogany table extended to seat all 15 family members, with Evelyn and William at opposite ends as host and hostess. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier above, and the fine china place settings, which Evelyn had inherited from her grandmother, were positioned with mathematical precision. I watched carefully as Evelyn directed everyone to their seats, noticing how she insisted I take the chair directly across from her, with Jake to my left, and Abigail thankfully to my right. Meredith and her husband Bradley were seated near Evelyn, while Jake's grandfather Harold was placed at William's end of the table, along with William's brother and his wife. "Hannah, that chair right there," Evelyn pointed emphatically when I hesitated near a different seat. Her tone was pleasant, but firm, brooking no argument. Once everyone was seated, William offered a lengthy Thanksgiving blessing, during which I caught Evelyn watching me through barely open eyes, supposedly closed in prayer. There was something unsettling in her gaze, an anticipation that made my skin crawl. The feast began with a parade of appetizers, butternut squash soup, stuffed mushrooms, and a charcuterie board that Evelyn made sure everyone knew had been prepared by a specialty shop that supplied European royalty. Throughout this first course, conversation flowed around business successes, the children's school achievements, and upcoming vacation plans. "Jake and Hannah, are you still planning that little trip to the Maine coast for Christmas?" Evelyn asked, emphasizing little in a way that suggested our vacation plans were inadequate compared to Meredith and Bradley's upcoming journey to the Swiss Alps. "Actually," Jake replied, "we've decided to go to Hawaii instead. Hannah's been working incredibly hard on the Westfield campaign, and she deserves some real relaxation." I squeezed Jake's hand gratefully under the table. Evelyn's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Hawaii, how commercial," she remarked. "So many tourists." "That's the point, Mom," Jake said firmly. "We want to relax, not impress anyone." A brief, uncomfortable silence followed before William asked Bradley about a mutual fund they were both invested in, steering the conversation back to safer waters. As the main course approached, I noticed Evelyn making small gestures to the hired server, who nodded and disappeared into the kitchen. Minutes later, he returned with both salads, Meredith's traditional green salad and Evelyn's mysterious special creation. "Before the turkey," Evelyn announced, "we simply must try this exquisite salad I've prepared. It's a family recipe from the European side of our ancestry, very refined." The server began placing small portions of both salads on everyone's plates, but I noticed Evelyn specifically directing him regarding mine. "No, Thomas, give Hannah a larger portion of my special salad. She appreciates fine food." I caught the strange emphasis on fine food and felt my suspicions deepen. Next to me, Abigail shot me a concerned glance. "What's in this salad, Aunt Evelyn?" she asked innocently. "It looks so unique." "Oh, just some imported greens, a special vinaigrette, and a few other ingredients that make it distinctive," Evelyn replied vaguely. "Family secret." I looked down at the generous portion on my plate, and again caught that strange medicinal smell beneath the vinaigrette. Something in my memory stirred, a warning. Then it clicked. The scent was similar to the shellfish enzyme that had triggered my severe allergic reaction 3 years ago at a business dinner. I had ended up in the emergency room with an EpiPen injection and a night of observation. A cold realization washed over me. Evelyn knew about my shellfish allergy. She had been present when Jake and I had discussed it at a family dinner last year when seafood was served. She had even commented on how inconvenient food allergies must be. As everyone began to taste their salads, Evelyn's eyes remained fixed on me, watching with an intensity that confirmed my suspicions. She was waiting for me to eat it, waiting for a reaction. I glanced at Meredith's salad on my plate, the simple green one, and then back at Evelyn's mysterious creation. In that moment, with everyone distracted by conversation and the passing of bread baskets, I made a split-second decision, using the distraction of Harold. Asking for the butter dish to be passed, I swiftly switched the positions of the two salads on my plate. The larger portion of Evelyn's special salad was now where Meredith's green salad had been, and vice versa. Evelyn, who had been momentarily engaged in answering a question from Bradley, turned her attention back to me just as I was taking a bite of what now appeared to be her special salad, but was actually Meredith's safe green salad. "How is it, Hannah?" she asked eagerly, leaning forward slightly. "Delicious," I replied truthfully, maintaining eye contact. "So fresh and simple." A flash of confusion crossed Evelyn's face, quickly replaced by disappointment. She frowned slightly, looking at my plate with puzzlement. Meanwhile, across the table, Meredith had taken a large bite of what she thought was her own green salad, but was actually Evelyn's special creation. The reaction was immediate and dramatic. Meredith's face contorted in disgust. She coughed violently, spitting the food back onto her plate. "What is this?" she gasped, reaching for her water glass. "It tastes terrible." All conversation halted as everyone turned to look at Meredith, who was now gulping water and wiping her tongue with her napkin. "Mum, what did you put in this salad?" she demanded, her voice rising with anger and confusion. "It tastes like chemicals." Evelyn's face had drained of colour. That's not possible. You must have the wrong salad." "Wrong salad?" Meredith snapped. "I'm eating my green salad, and it tastes like you put cleaning products in it." Harold, Jake's grandfather, had been watching the scene unfold with his still sharp eyes. He leaned forward, sniffing deliberately at Meredith's plate. "That smell," he said slowly, his voice carrying the authority of his 85 years. "I recognize it from my days in the pharmaceutical business. That's powdered shellfish extract, isn't it, Evelyn? The concentrated kind used in some Asian medicines." All eyes turned to Evelyn, whose composure was rapidly crumbling. "Shellfish extract," Jake repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He turned to me, realization dawning. "Hannah, you're severely allergic to shellfish." "Deathly allergic," I confirmed, meeting Evelyn's gaze steadily across the table. The dining room erupted in shocked exclamations and questions. Jake stood up so abruptly that his chair fell backward with a crash. "Mother," he said, his voice shaking with fury, "did you deliberately put shellfish in a salad and try to serve it to my wife, knowing she could go into anaphylactic shock?" Evelyn's hands fluttered nervously. "Don't be ridiculous, Jake. It was a simple mistake. I forgot about Hannah's little food sensitivity." "Little food sensitivity," Jake's voice rose. "She spent a night in the hospital last time you were there when we discussed it." Meredith was staring at her mother in horror. "Mom, was I eating what you intended for Hannah? Were you trying to poison her?" "Of course not," Evelyn protested, but her usual poise had completely evaporated. "It was a special recipe. European, very sophisticated. It's poison to someone with a shellfish allergy," William said quietly from the other end of the table. It was perhaps the first time I had ever heard him contradict his wife. As the implications of what had nearly happened sank in, I felt a strange mixture of vindication and nausea. My intuition had been right. The woman who had smiled to my face for 7 years had just attempted to cause me serious harm. "How did you know?" Abigail whispered to me, her face pale with shock. "How did you know not to eat it?" "It smelled wrong," I answered simply. "And I've learned to trust my instincts about your mother, Jake." The Thanksgiving dinner had screeched to a halt, but the real confrontation was just beginning. "I want answers, Mother, now." Jake's voice cut through the chaos that had erupted around the dining table. His face was flushed with anger, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. I had never seen him so furious, not even during our worst arguments. Evelyn's carefully constructed facade was crumbling before our eyes. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the mottled red splotches appearing on her neck and cheeks. She looked around the table, seemingly searching for an ally, but finding none. It was just a test, she finally said, her voice small, yet somehow defiant. I wanted to see if Hannah was really allergic or just being difficult. So many people these days claim food allergies when they're just being picky. The absurdity of her statement hung in the air for a moment before Jake responded. A test. You were willing to risk my wife's life for a test. His voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. She could have died, mother. Oh, don't be so dramatic. Evelyn attempted to regain her composure, straightening her posture. I only used a tiny amount, just enough to cause a small reaction to see if it was real. Meredith, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since discovering her unwitting role in her mother's scheme, suddenly pushed back from the table. I can't believe this, she said, her voice trembling. You used me. You knew I would bring my usual salad, and you planned to use it as, what? A control in your sick experiment. Evelyn turned to her daughter, reaching out a hand that Meredith promptly recoiled from. Darling, no, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Meredith shot back. I've spent my entire life trying to be your perfect daughter. I've defended your behavior, made excuses for your high standards, and now I find out you're capable of this. William, who had been silently observing from the head of the table, finally spoke. Evelyn, what were you thinking? This goes beyond your usual concerns about Hannah. The fact that William, who had never once contradicted his wife in my presence, was now questioning her, seemed to shake Evelyn more than anything else. You don't understand. None of you do, she insisted, looking around at the shocked faces of her family. I've worked so hard to build this family, to maintain our standards, our position in society. Then Jake brings home this marketing girl from nowhere with her public university education and her middle-class values. That's enough, Jake said sharply, but Evelyn continued as if she couldn't stop herself. I've watched her change you, Jake, pull you away from your responsibilities to this family, and everyone just accepts it. What about our legacy? What about the Arlington name? Harold, who had been watching intently, spoke up from his place at the table. The Arlington name, he said with quiet authority, was built on integrity and hard work, Evelyn, not on poisoning family members who don't meet your arbitrary standards. Abigail leaned forward, her eyes locked on her aunt. This isn't the first time, is it, Aunt Evelyn? You've been trying to sabotage Hannah for years. A charged silence fell over the table. Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Remember Hannah's birthday cake last year that mysteriously gave only her food poisoning, Abigail continued. Or how about the time you accidentally spilled red wine on her white dress right before the charity gala photos? Or suggested she use that face cream that gave her that terrible rash before Jake's work party? I stared at Abigail, pieces falling into place. I had attributed those incidents to bad luck, never wanting to believe my mother-in-law could be so deliberately malicious. Is this true? Jake asked his mother, his voice hollow with disbelief. Evelyn didn't deny it. Instead, she lifted her chin defiantly. I was protecting you, Jake. She was never good enough for you. Never good enough for this family. The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I had always suspected Evelyn felt this way, but hearing her say it outright was still painful. That wasn't your decision to make, Jake said quietly. I love Hannah. I chose her, and if you can't respect that, if you can't accept her as my wife and treat her with basic human decency, then you've left me no choice. He took a deep breath before delivering his ultimatum. Either you apologize sincerely to Hannah right now and commit to changing your behavior, or we're leaving, and we won't be back until you do. Evelyn's eyes widened. You would choose her over your own mother, over your family. Hannah is my family, Jake replied without hesitation. And yes, if forced to choose, I choose her, every time. I reached for Jake's hand, overwhelmed by his unwavering support. Across the table, I saw Meredith watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. A mixture of surprise, resentment, and something that might have been respect. Evelyn looked around the table, seemingly expecting someone to defend her. When no one did, something in her seemed to break. Tears filled her eyes. Real ones this time, not the manipulative ones she usually employed. All I've ever wanted was the best for this family, she said, her voice cracking. Everything I've done out of love. That's not love, Evelyn, Harold said gently. That's control. The truth of his words seemed to hit Evelyn like a physical blow. For perhaps the first time in all the years I'd known her, she had no ready response, no way to reframe the narrative in her favour. "I think," William said after a long silence, "that we should end this dinner early. Clearly, we all have a lot to process." No one argued. The elaborate Thanksgiving feast lay mostly untouched. As family members began to rise from their seats, the holiday irrevocably shattered. As Jake and I prepared to leave, Meredith approached us in the foyer, away from the others. "Hannah," she said hesitantly, "I had no idea about any of it. I know we've never been close, but I would never have gone along with something like this." "I believe you," I told her, and surprisingly I meant it. The shock and betrayal on her face had been too genuine to fake. "Could we talk sometime?" she asked, glancing nervously toward the dining room where her mother could still be heard arguing with William. "There are things you should probably know about Mom, about a lot of things." I nodded, exchanging phone numbers with my sister-in-law for what felt like the first time, despite our 7 years of being family. As Jake and I drove home in silence, the weight of what had happened settled over us. The family Jake had known his entire life had been exposed as deeply dysfunctional, with his mother at the center of the toxicity. "I'm so sorry," he finally said as we pulled into our driveway. "I knew she was difficult, but I never imagined she would go this far. I should have protected you better." "You couldn't have known," I assured him, though part of me wondered if there had been signs we both had ignored in our desire to maintain family peace. That night, as we talked through everything until the early hours of the morning, we made the difficult decision to take a complete break from Evelyn until she could demonstrate genuine change. It wasn't a decision we made lightly, but after what had happened, it felt like the only way forward. What we didn't realize then was that Thanksgiving dinner was just the beginning of a much longer, more difficult journey for the entire Arlington family. The days following Thanksgiving were surreal. Jake and I moved through our normal routines, work, home, sleep, but everything felt different. The truth about Evelyn had cracked our world open, forcing us to reevaluate every interaction, every family gathering, every seemingly innocent comment from the past 7 years. Jake was taking it particularly hard. He alternated between simmering anger and profound sadness, sometimes waking in the middle of the night to pace our bedroom. "I keep thinking about all the times I dismissed your concerns," he told me one night. "All the times I said, 'That's just how she is,' or 'she means well.' I was complicit in her behavior." "You were her son caught in the middle," I reminded him. "She manipulated you your entire life. That's not your fault." 3 days after Thanksgiving, my phone lit up with a text from Meredith. "Can we meet for coffee tomorrow, alone?" I showed the message to Jake, who looked surprised but nodded. "Maybe it's time you two actually got to know each other without my mother's interference." The next morning, I met Meredith at a small cafe halfway between our homes. She looked different somehow, less polished, more human. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer outfit. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down across from her. "I wasn't sure you would." "To be honest, I wasn't sure either," I admitted. A small smile flickered across her face. "Fair enough. I know I haven't exactly been welcoming to you over the years." We ordered coffee, and an awkward silence fell between us until Meredith finally spoke again. "I need to tell you about our mother," she began. "Not just what happened at Thanksgiving, but everything. Because I think you need to understand what you're dealing with." For the next hour, Meredith told me stories about growing up with Evelyn that made my stomach churn. The constant pressure to be perfect, the manipulation, the way Evelyn would pit Meredith against other girls, including her own friends, to ensure her daughter's loyalty remained exclusively with her. "She convinced me that other women were always competition, never allies," Meredith explained. "That's why I was so hostile when you entered the picture. In my mind, you were taking Jake away from us, from me. It's what she trained me to believe." "And now?" I asked cautiously. Meredith looked down at her coffee cup. "Now I'm questioning everything, including my own marriage." She twisted her wedding ring nervously. "Bradley is exactly who my mother wanted me to marry. Prestigious family, impressive career, perfect on paper. But we're not happy. We've never been happy." The vulnerability in her admission stunned me. This was a side of Meredith I'd never imagined existed beneath her perfect exterior. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "Don't be. It's not your problem to fix." She straightened her shoulders slightly. "But there's something else you should know. After you and Jake left on Thanksgiving, Mum had what Dad called an episode. She was ranting, saying things that didn't make sense. It was like all her carefully constructed control just collapsed. What kind of things, Gay? I asked, concerned despite everything. Paranoid things. How everyone was against her. How she was the only one protecting the family legacy. Dad finally called our family doctor, who suggested she might need a psychiatric evaluation. Meredith looked up at me. This isn't the first time. There have been incidents over the years, always carefully concealed from outsiders. Dad's always protected her, made excuses. This revelation added a new dimension to the situation. Evelyn's behaviour went beyond mere snobbery or dislike of me. There might be actual mental health issues at play. Has she agreed to get help? I asked. Meredith shook her head. Not yet, but Dad's insisting this time. I think seeing how far she went with you scared him. It scared all of us. When I returned home and shared this conversation with Jake, he was quiet for a long time. I remember incidents from childhood, he finally said. Mum having bad days where she'd stay in her room, Dad telling us not to disturb her. I never connected it to anything serious. The following weeks were challenging. Jake's father called several times, sounding older and more tired than I'd ever heard him. Evelyn was refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing, insisting that everyone was overreacting to a simple misunderstanding. Jake maintained his boundary. He wouldn't speak with his mother until she admitted what she'd done and sought help. This led to difficult conversations with other family members, some of whom thought we were being too harsh. Your mother has always been good to this family, his uncle argued during one phone call. Whatever happened, I'm sure she didn't mean any real harm. She put shellfish extract in food meant for my wife, who has a life-threatening shellfish allergy. Jake responded flatly. Tell me how that isn't meant to cause harm. The family began to divide, those who recognized the severity of what had happened and those who were still caught in Evelyn's web of manipulation and denial. Through all this, Abigail remained our steadfast ally. She visited often, bringing food and moral support. Aunt Evelyn has gotten away with this behavior for decades because everyone enables her, she told us during one visit. What you're doing by standing your ground is actually the kindest thing anyone has done for her in years. You're forcing her to face reality. Christmas approached, bringing with it the question of family traditions. The Arlingtons had always spent Christmas Eve at Evelyn and William's home, with an elaborate dinner and gift exchange. This year, Jake and I decided to keep our plans to go to Hawaii, escaping the family drama entirely. The night before our departure, William showed up at our door unannounced. He looked haggard, the confident businessman replaced by an exhausted husband. May I come in? He asked, his voice uncharacteristically humble. Over coffee at our kitchen table, he told us that Evelyn had finally agreed to see a psychiatrist after a particularly bad episode where she had accused him of conspiring with us against her. The doctor thinks it might be a combination of personality disorder and anxiety, he explained. Possibly with some early cognitive issues beginning. She's starting medication and therapy. That's a positive step, Jake said cautiously. William nodded, then looked directly at me. Hannah, I owe you an apology. I've stood by for years while Evelyn treated you poorly. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that it was between you and her. I was wrong. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. This was a side of William I had never seen. I appreciate that, I said simply. She's not well, he continued, but that doesn't excuse what she did, what she's been doing. I want you both to know I support your decision to maintain distance until she shows real change. It's what she needs, even if she can't see it yet. After William left, Jake and I held each other for a long time processing this new development. Do you think she can change? I asked him. I don't know, he answered honestly, but for the first time she's actually getting help. That's something. Our Hawaiian vacation provided a much-needed respite from the intensity of the past month. We swam in the ocean, hiked to waterfalls, and spent long evenings watching the sunset, talking about our future and what kind of boundaries we needed to maintain with Jake's family going forward. I've been thinking, Jake said on our last night as we sat on our hotel balcony, maybe we should host next Thanksgiving, on our terms in our home. The suggestion surprised me. Are you sure that's a big statement? He nodded, taking my hand. It's time to create our own traditions, and maybe if my mother has made progress by then she can be invited. As a guest, not the one in control. I squeezed his hand, feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. I'd like that. 3 months after the disastrous Thanksgiving dinner, Jake and I were still navigating the aftermath. We had begun seeing a family therapist who specialized in toxic family dynamics. which was helping us process our complicated feelings and establish healthier boundaries. What your mother-in-law did was a form of emotional abuse, Dr. Patterson had told us during our second session, and it didn't start with the salad incident. That was just the culmination of years of subtle undermining. Hearing a professional validate what I had experienced was unexpectedly emotional. For so long, I had questioned whether I was being too sensitive or imagining the hostility behind Evelyn's helpful comments. Jake had reached a similar realization. I enabled her behavior, he admitted during one particularly difficult session. I wanted to believe the best of my mother, so I minimized or explained away her actions. I failed to protect Hannah when she needed me to stand up for her. You were caught in a difficult position, Dr. Patterson reminded him. Children of manipulative parents often struggle to recognize the manipulation because it's been normalized throughout their lives. These insights helped ease the guilt Jake had been carrying and strengthened our resolve to maintain healthy boundaries going forward. Meanwhile, our relationship with Meredith continued to evolve in surprising ways. What had begun as a tentative coffee meeting had developed into something resembling friendship. We met every couple of weeks, sometimes with Jake, sometimes just the two of us. It's strange, she confided during one of our lunches. I spent so many years competing with you for Mom's approval, and now that I've stopped trying to win that unwinnable game, I actually like you. I laughed. The feeling's mutual. Who would have thought, Itoye? Meredith had begun her own therapy journey and was having difficult conversations with Bradley about their marriage. We're trying couples counseling, she told me. I don't know if we can fix things, but at least we're finally being honest with each other. As for Evelyn, the situation was more complicated. After her initial diagnosis, she had reluctantly begun a treatment plan that included medication and weekly therapy sessions. William provided cautious updates, careful not to violate his wife's privacy, while keeping Jake informed about her progress. The doctor says she's participating, he reported during one phone call. But she still struggles with accepting responsibility for her actions. She tends to externalize blame. In early March, William called with news that felt like a breakthrough. Your mother wants to talk to you, Jake. She's been working on something with her therapist, a letter of some kind. Would you be willing to meet with her? The doctor would be present. After discussing it with me and our therapist, Jake, agreed to the meeting, but set clear conditions I would accompany him. We would meet on neutral territory, and we could leave at any time if things became uncomfortable. The meeting was set for a private room at Dr. Sir Levine's office, Evelyn's psychiatrist. When we arrived, Evelyn was already seated, looking smaller, somehow less intimidating than I remembered. William sat beside her, his hand occasionally reaching over to steady hers. Dr. Levine began by establishing ground rules for the conversation, then nodded to Evelyn. With trembling hands, she unfolded a letter and began to read. Jake Hannah. Her voice was uncharacteristically uncertain. I've been working with Dr. Levine to understand my behavior and its impact on others. This is difficult for me, but I need to acknowledge that my actions at Thanksgiving were inexcusable. She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I deliberately put shellfish extract in the salad intended for Hannah, knowing about her allergy. I told myself I was just testing whether the allergy was real. But the truth is, I wanted to create a situation where Hannah would appear difficult or problematic to the family. I was trying to undermine her. Jake's hand tightened around mine as his mother continued. This wasn't an isolated incident. For years, I've engaged in behaviors designed to make Hannah feel unwelcome and inadequate. I now understand that these actions stem from my own insecurities and need for control, possibly compounded by untreated mental health issues. The clinical language suggested the words had been crafted with her therapist's help, but the fact that she was saying them at all felt significant. I am deeply sorry for the pain I've caused both of you. I am working to address the underlying issues that led to this behavior, and while I know I cannot undo what I've done, I hope that with time and continued treatment, I might earn back some measure of trust. When she finished reading, the room was silent except for the sound of the wall clock ticking. I glanced at Jake, whose face reflected a complex mix of emotions, relief, sadness, cautious hope. Thank you for saying this, he finally said. It can't have been easy. It wasn't, Evelyn admitted, looking down at her hands. Nothing about this process has been easy. Facing who I've been, what I've done, it's painful. I appreciate your apology, I said carefully, and I'm glad you're getting help. That's an important step. Evelyn nodded, meeting my eyes briefly before looking away. There was shame there, and something else. Perhaps the first glimmers of genuine self-awareness. The meeting wasn't a magical reconciliation. There was too much hurt for that too many years of toxic behavior to be erased by one apology, no matter how sincere. But it was a beginning, a small step toward whatever new relationship might be possible. As spring turned to summer, we maintained careful, limited contact with Evelyn. Short visits in public places, always with clear beginnings and endings. She continued her treatment, and while there were setbacks and difficult moments, there were also signs of real change. By late summer, Jake and I began discussing our Thanksgiving plan in earnest. We decided to host dinner at our home, inviting both sides of our family, including, with significant boundaries and expectations, Evelyn and William. We'll make it clear that any inappropriate behavior means the visit ends immediately, Jake said, as we finalized the guest list, and we'll have Abigail and Meredith on standby as allies. The months of therapy had helped us develop strategies for managing potentially difficult family situations, including code words we could use to check in with each other, and a clear exit plan if things went south. When November arrived, I found myself strangely calm as we prepared for what would be the first major family gathering since last year's disaster. Our home looked beautiful, decorated with tasteful but unpretentious autumn decor. The menu we had planned reflected both of our family traditions, my mother's cornbread stuffing alongside William's favourite bourbon sweet potatoes. The morning of Thanksgiving, as I put the finishing touches on the table settings, Jake wrapped his arms around me from behind. "No matter what happens today," he murmured into my hair, "I want you to know how proud I am of us. We didn't let what happened break us. If anything, we're stronger." He was right. The past year had been challenging in ways we never expected, but we had faced it together, supporting each other, through the difficult conversations and painful realizations. The doorbell rang at exactly 2:00. I took a deep breath, squeezed Jake's hand, and went to welcome our first guests, including somewhere in the line of arrivals, my mother-in-law. When Evelyn and William arrived, there was a moment of tension as she hesitated on our doorstep. She looked different, less rigidly perfect, more human. Her hair was styled more simply, her makeup lighter. She carried a small bouquet of flowers, not the elaborate arrangement I would have expected a year ago. "Thank you for including us," she said quietly, handing me the flowers. "Your home looks lovely." It was a small moment, but significant. For perhaps the first time she had offered a compliment without a hidden barb, without comparison or qualification. As we gathered around the table I had set, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey the past year had been. The painful revelation, at last, Thanksgiving, had forced all of us to confront uncomfortable truths, to examine patterns of behavior that had gone unchallenged for decades. Healing was a process, not a destination. Evelyn might never be the warm, nurturing mother-in-law I had once hoped for, but she was making genuine efforts to be better. Our relationship would always require careful boundaries and clear communication, but perhaps that was progress enough. When it came time to serve the food, I found myself facing a poetic moment of truth as I placed a plate in front of Evelyn. Our eyes met and I saw understanding there, an acknowledgement of how far we had come and how easily things could have gone differently. "Everything looks delicious, Hannah," she said, and though the words were simple, they carried the weight of a journey neither of us could have imagined a year ago. Later that evening, after the guests had left and Jake and I were cleaning up in comfortable silence, I thought about what this experience had taught me, about trusting my instincts even when doubting myself would have been easier, about the courage to stand up for myself even when it meant disrupting the peace. About how real family is defined not by blood or tradition, but by mutual respect and genuine care. Most importantly, I had learned that some boundaries aren't just healthy, they're essential. That sometimes loving someone means refusing to participate in harmful patterns, even when that refusal creates conflict. As we finished putting away the last of the dishes, Jake pulled me into a hug. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, noticing my contemplative mood. "Just reflecting on how much has changed since last Thanksgiving," I replied, "and how grateful I am that I trusted my instincts that day." "Me too," he said softly. "More than you know." The road ahead would still have its challenges. Evelyn's progress would have setbacks. Family dynamics wouldn't transform overnight. But we had taken the crucial first steps towards something healthier, something more authentic. And for that, I was truly thankful. What about you? Have you ever had to trust your instincts in a difficult family situation? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that. Trusting their gut is the right thing to do. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that save us.